In the annals of horror literature, few entities inspire as much dread and fascination as IT, the shape-shifting cosmic horror that haunts the fictional town of Derry, Maine. Stephen King's magnum opus, published in 1986, introduced readers to a creature so ancient and malevolent that it transcends our understanding of evil itself. At the heart of this tale lies Pennywise the Dancing Clown, the most recognizable manifestation of IT, and the Deadlights, the true form of this entity that exists beyond the comprehension of mortal minds. This comprehensive exploration delves deep into the mythology, origins, nature, and ultimate meaning of IT. We will traverse the twisted pathways of Derry's history, examine the psychological and cosmic horror elements that make this entity so terrifying, and understand why Pennywise has become one of the most iconic monsters in popular culture. From the primordial depths of the Macroverse to the storm drains of a small Maine town, we will uncover the secrets of an entity that feeds not just on flesh, but on fear itself. The story of IT is ultimately a story about childhood, memory, trauma, and the power of belief. It asks fundamental questions about the nature of evil, whether it can be truly defeated, and what price must be paid by those who dare to confront it. Through the experiences of the Losers Club, 7 friends who face IT as children and must return as adults to finish what they started, King crafts a narrative that operates on multiple levels as a coming-of-age tale, a horror story, and a meditation on the loss of innocence. Understanding IT requires understanding the unique cosmology that Stephen King has created throughout his works, particularly the connections to the Dark Tower series and the concept of the Prim, the magical force that once filled the universe. It is not merely a monster that can be killed with conventional weapons. It is a force of chaos and consumption that has existed since before our universe took its current form. To grasp the true horror of Pennywise and the Deadlights, we must first accept that we are dealing with something fundamentally alien to human comprehension. Part 1. The Nature of It, Chapter 1. Origins in the Macroverse. To understand it, we must begin not in Derry, Maine, but in a place that exists outside of space and time as we know it, the Macroverse, also known as the Todash Darkness. This is the space between worlds, the void that exists beyond our universe, where entities of immense power dwell. E.T. originated in this realm, a being of pure predatory instinct and malevolence that existed long before humanity, before Earth, perhaps even before our universe itself coalesced into its current form. The Macroverse is described as a realm of chaos and possibility, where the normal rules of physics and reality do not apply. In Stephen King's interconnected mythology, particularly as elaborated in the Dark Tower series, the Macroverse is part of the Prim, the magical, soup from which all creation emerged. As the Prim receded and the universe took on more ordered, structured forms, certain entities that thrived in chaos found themselves needing to adapt to survive in this new reality. It is one such entity. Unlike beings that evolved within our universe, IT came from outside, carried on the wings of a cataclysmic event. According to the lore revealed in King's novel, IT arrived on Earth during prehistoric times, crashing into the area that would eventually become Derry, Maine. This arrival was not random. IT was drawn to Earth by the presence of sentient life, specifically life capable of experiencing fear, which serves as both food and seasoning for the entity's appetite. The exact nature of IT's journey to Earth remains shrouded in mystery, but evidence suggests it traveled through the Todash darkness, navigating between dimensions. Bill Denbrough, in his adult confrontation with IT, experiences visions of this journey a nightmarish passage through the void, where IT existed in its true form, unconstrained by the need to assume shapes comprehensible to human minds. This journey may have taken millennia, or may have been instantaneous, as time has no meaning in the spaces between worlds. What makes IT particularly terrifying is that it represents a type of cosmic horror that predates and supersedes human morality or understanding. It is not evil in the way humans understand evil. It has no malice in the human sense, no desire for power or recognition. It simply is, driven by an alien hunger that defines its existence. This places it in the tradition of Lovecraftian cosmic horror, where the true terror comes from confronting something so fundamentally other that it cannot be reasoned with, appealed to, or understood in human terms. Yet it is also more than a mindless predator. It possesses intelligence, cunning, and a sadistic creativity in how it hunts and consumes its prey. It understands fear intimately, not just as sustenance but as an art form. It takes pleasure in the hunt, in the psychological torment of its victims, in crafting elaborate scenarios designed to maximize terror before the kill. This suggests a level of consciousness and even personality, albeit one utterly alien to human psychology. The question of whether IT is unique or one of many such entities remains tantalizingly unanswered in King's work. References in the Dark Tower series suggest there are other creatures from the Prim and the Todash darkness, beings of similar or even greater power. The Crimson King, Dandalo, and other entities hint at a larger cosmology where IT is but one predator among many. However, within the context of our world, within Derry, IT reigns supreme, an apex predator with no natural enemies at least, not until the Losers Club discovers the power to resist it. Chapter 2. The True Form. Understanding the Deadlights. If Pennywise, the dancing clown, is the face that IT shows to the world, the Deadlights are its true essence, the reality behind the mask. The deadlights are described as orange lights or luminous orbs that exist in the deadlight space, a realm that may be part of the Macroverse itself or a pocket dimension connected to IT's consciousness. To look upon the deadlights is to confront IT in its pure, unfiltered form, and for most humans, this encounter means madness, catatonia, or death. The deadlights represent a concept that recurs throughout cosmic horror, the idea that there are truths so profound and alien that the human mind cannot process them without breaking. Lovecraft called this concept forbidden knowledge, the understanding of humanity's cosmic insignificance that drives characters to insanity. The deadlights embody this literally. They are a visual representation of IT's true nature, and that nature is so incompatible with human consciousness that witnessing it causes the mind to shut down or fragment. Witnesses who survive glimpsing the deadlights describe them in varying ways, suggesting that even in its true form, IT is difficult for human perception to accurately capture. Some see them as lights, hence the name, while others perceive them as a pattern, a geometry, or a color that exists outside the normal spectrum. The orange glow that typically characterizes the deadlights may be the closest approximation human vision can create for something that exists in dimensions beyond our sensory capabilities. The effect of the deadlights on the human psyche is consistently catastrophic. Beverly Marsh, when caught in the deadlights during her childhood encounter with IT, experiences them as an orange glow that threatens to trap her consciousness forever in a realm outside of time and space. She describes it as being lost in an eternal now, where past and future collapse into a single moment of horrified awareness. Only the intervention of her friends, particularly the psychic connection she shares with the other members of the Losers Club, pulls her back from this abyss. Stan Uris is not so fortunate in his later years. As an adult, the mere memory of the deadlights, or perhaps a psychic impression of them transmitted through the connection the losers share, is enough to push him to suicide rather than face them again. This speaks to the traumatic power of the deadlights, their ability to imprint themselves so deeply on human consciousness that years or even decades later, the trauma remains fresh and overwhelming. Stan's death before the adult confrontation with IT raises profound questions about whether he saw something in the deadlights that the others did not. Some ultimate horror that made him choose death over returning to Derry. The relationship between the physical manifestations of IT and the deadlights is complex. When IT assumes a form, whether Pennywise, a werewolf, a leper, or any other shape, it is essentially creating a biological puppet, a construct of matter that can interact with the physical world. But this form is hollow in a sense, an empty shell animated by the deadlights. When damage is done to these physical forms, it is not IT itself that bleeds or suffers, but merely the avatar it has created. To truly harm IT, one must somehow reach through the physical manifestation to strike at the deadlights themselves. This creates an interesting paradox. It is simultaneously immensely powerful and strangely vulnerable. In its true form as the deadlights, it is nearly invincible, existing in a state that human weapons and even human understanding cannot reach. But when it manifests in physical reality, it becomes subject to some degree to physical laws. It can be wounded, it can bleed, and under the right circumstances, particularly when confronted by belief that is strong enough to reject its reality, it can even be killed or at least driven back. The deadlights also serve as a prison of sorts. Those whose consciousness is trapped in them enter a state that might be described as worse than death. They are not dead, but they are not alive in any meaningful sense. Their consciousness continues to exist, aware but unable to act, locked in an eternal moment of terror. This fate befalls some of IT's victims, and the losers encounter these trapped souls during their journeys into IT's lair. The implications are horrifying. It does not merely kill, it can trap and torment consciousness indefinitely, adding the suffering of its victims to its own power. Understanding the deadlights is key to understanding why IT is so difficult to defeat. You cannot kill the deadlights by destroying a physical form. You cannot reason with them or appeal to them. The only way to combat the deadlights is to refuse to accept them, to assert a different reality through the power of belief and imagination. This is why children are particularly dangerous to IT. Their ability to believe, to imagine, and to deny reality in favor of their own constructs is at its peak. Adults, with their rigidly defined understanding of what is and is not possible, find it much harder to wield this weapon. Chapter 3. The Shapeshifter's Arsenal. IT's defining characteristic, beyond its alien nature and the horrifying reality of the Deadlights, is its ability to shapeshift. This is not mere illusion or hypnosis, though IT is certainly capable of both. When IT assumes a form, it becomes that form on a physical level, creating matter and structure that can be seen, touched, and interacted with. This shape-shifting ability serves multiple purposes. It allows IT to hunt more effectively, to terrorize specific individuals by manifesting as their particular fears, and to exist in our reality despite being fundamentally alien to it. The range of forms IT can assume appears to be nearly limitless, constrained only by its imagination and its understanding of human fear. Throughout the novel and its adaptations, we see IT manifest as a clown, a werewolf, a mummy, a leper, a giant bird, a shark, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, a crawling eye, an animated statue, a dying boy, the ghost of a murdered child, and countless other horrors. Some of these forms are drawn from popular culture and the collective unconscious universal fears and archetypal monsters. Others are intensely personal, tailored to the specific traumas and phobias of individual victims. But among all these forms, Pennywise the dancing clown is special. It is IT's preferred form, the shape it returns to again and again, its default state when not actively hunting. This raises the question, why a clown? The answer lies in understanding what clowns represent in our cultural consciousness. Clowns are liminal figures, existing in the space between comedy and tragedy, between the familiar and the uncanny. They wear painted faces that hide their true features, creating a disconnect between the human beneath and the artificial persona on display. They are supposed to make us laugh, to entertain children. Yet there is something inherently unsettling about them, a falseness, a performance of joy that can easily slip into something darker. Pennywise embodies this duality perfectly. He appears in the colorful costume of a circus clown, complete with pom-poms, an orange wig, and a painted smile. His voice can be jovial, friendly, enticing. He offers balloons and cotton candy, the traditional treats associated with childhood entertainment. But there is always something wrong, something off about Pennywise. His eyes may be yellow and predatory. His smile reveals too many teeth, rows upon rows of them, shark-like and sharp. His movements can be jerky and unnatural. And there is a smell about him, a scent of decay and old earth, of the circus graveyard, as one character describes it. The choice of a clown as IT's primary form is also deeply strategic. Clowns are associated with children's entertainment, giving Pennywise a pretext to approach children without immediately arousing suspicion. In the 1950s setting of the novel's childhood portions, when stranger danger was less emphasized, a clown appearing in public or even speaking to children would be seen as unusual, but not necessarily threatening. By the time the wrongness of Pennywise becomes apparent, IT has often already isolated its victim or gotten close enough to strike. Beyond Pennywise, IT's other forms reveal much about how it hunts and feeds. IT does not simply appear as random monsters. It reads its victims, delving into their minds to extract their deepest fears. For Eddie Kasprak, whose overprotective mother has instilled in him a terror of disease and contamination, E.T. appears as a leper, rotting and infectious. For Mike Hanlon, who witnessed a traumatic incident involving a bird as a child, IT manifests as a massive prehistoric bird. For Stan Uris, whose Jewish heritage and fear of anti-Semitic violence lurks beneath his rational exterior, IT appears as drowned boys from a historical tragedy, and later as the boys from the standpipe incident. This personalization of fear serves a practical purpose for IT. Fear, we learn, makes the meat taste better. Children who are terrified, who have been psychologically tormented before being killed, provide more sustenance than those who are killed quickly. It is not just a predator, but a sadist, taking pleasure in the elaborate terror it creates. It will stalk a victim for days or even weeks, appearing in increasingly threatening forms, building anticipation and dread, before finally striking. But its shapeshifting has limitations that prove crucial to its eventual defeat. First, while IT can assume any form, these forms are not invulnerable. When damaged, they bleed strange, unnatural blood perhaps, but blood nonetheless. The losers discover that silver, believed to harm supernatural creatures in folklore, can indeed hurt IT when that belief is strong enough. This suggests that IT's physical manifestations are subject to the rules of belief and imagination as much as they are to physical laws. Second, IT's forms are constrained by the expectations and beliefs of those who perceive them. When a victim sees Pennywise and believes they are seeing a clown, IT must largely behave as a clown would, at least initially. This is why IT often engages in clownish behavior juggling, making balloon animals, telling jokes even as it prepares to kill. The performance is not optional. It is part of the form IT has chosen. Similarly, when IT appears as a werewolf, it must follow the mythology of werewolves as its victim understands them. This creates vulnerabilities that the losers learn to exploit. Third, there is a delay between IT's perception of fear and its manifestation of that fear. It must first read its victim's mind, understand their terror, and then construct an appropriate form. This means that IT works best against those whose fears are clear and defined. The Losers Club, by confronting their fears together and supporting each other, make themselves more difficult targets. Their collective imagination and belief can counter IT's manifestations, creating what amounts to a psychic battle of wills. The shape-shifting ability also reveals something important about IT's nature. It is fundamentally a creature of imagination and belief. It exists in a strange space where thought and reality intersect, where the power of belief can make things real. This is why IT is so dangerous to children, whose boundaries between imagination and reality are more fluid, but also why children are ultimately able to defeat it. Their imaginations are powerful enough to fight back. Part 2. The Cycles of Terror, Chapter 4. Derry, a town built on graves. The relationship between IT and the town of Derry, Maine, is symbiotic and sinister. IT did not simply happen to land in the area that would become Derry. In many ways, IT shaped Derry into what it is. The town's history is inseparable from IT's presence, marked by recurring cycles of violence, disappearance, and tragedy that the townspeople accept with a disturbing complacency. Derry is not just the hunting ground for a monster. It is a place corrupted and sustained by that monster's presence. A town that has entered into an unconscious pact with evil itself. Mike Hanlon, who becomes the keeper of Derry's history, uncovers a pattern that stretches back to the town's founding in the 18th century and beyond. Every 27 years, give or take, Derry experiences a period of heightened violence and tragedy. Children disappear in numbers that far exceed statistical norms. acts of mass violence occur with disturbing regularity. And then, as suddenly as it began, the violence stops, and Derry returns to a strange normalcy, its citizens going about their lives as if nothing unusual has happened. These cycles are IT's feeding cycles. It awakens from hibernation hungry, spends approximately a year to 18 months hunting and feeding, primarily on children whose fear is most potent, and then returns to sleep for another 27 years. The precise reason for this 27-year cycle is never fully explained, but it may be tied to IT's alien physiology and metabolism. Like a predator that gorges itself and then enters a period of dormancy, IT feeds until sated and then sleeps, conserving energy and allowing its food supply, the human population of Derry, to replenish itself. But IT's influence on Derry extends beyond these active feeding periods. Even when IT sleeps, its presence affects the town in subtle ways. There is a wrongness to Derry that perceptive outsiders can sense, a feeling that something is fundamentally off about the place. The town's history is marked by a disproportionate amount of tragedy and violence, even in the supposedly quiet years between IT's awakenings. Industrial accidents, domestic violence, suicides, and murders all occur at rates higher than statistical norms would predict. It is as if IT's presence has poisoned the very ground of Derry, creating an atmosphere that nurtures human cruelty and despair. Historical records, which Mike painstakingly researches, reveal incident after incident that bears IT's fingerprints. In 1740, the entire population of a settlement on the site of modern Derry vanished without a trace. In 1851, a group of lumberjacks massacred another group in a conflict over territory, displaying a level of savagery that shocked even the hardened frontier community. In 1876, a group of settlers poisoned tribal members at a supposed peace dinner. In 1906, the Kitchener Ironworks exploded during the Easter egg hunt, killing over 100 people, many of them children. The 1930s brought the Bradley gang shooting, where a group of criminals on the run held the entire town hostage and murdered numerous citizens before being killed themselves. But even this incident, horrific as it was, pales in comparison to the fire at the Black Spot, a nightclub for African American soldiers, which was deliberately set by a racist arson attack, killing everyone inside while Derry's fire department deliberately delayed their response. This incident reveals not just IT's direct influence, but how that influence amplifies the worst aspects of human nature. The racism and hatred that already existed in Derry found expression in mass murder, possibly encouraged or orchestrated by IT's presence. Most relevant to our story is the cycle that begins in 1957, when IT awakens to find 6-year-old Georgie Denbrough playing with a paper boat on a rainy October day. Georgie's murder, the moment when he reaches into the storm drain to retrieve his boat and encounters Pennywise, sets in motion the events that will lead to IT's first true challenge in millennia. Over the following months, children disappear or are found dead in circumstances that the adults of Derry systematically ignore or rationalize. Betty Ripsome, Ed Corcoran, and dozens of others vanish, while the town's authorities offer increasingly inadequate explanations. This willful blindness is one of IT's most insidious powers. It is not just that IT can hide, it is that IT makes people not want to see. Adults in Derry are peculiarly unable to perceive or remember the full extent of the tragedies occurring around them. They may acknowledge that children have died, but they do not connect the deaths, do not see the pattern, do not feel the appropriate level of alarm or demand for action. It is as if IT has cast a glamour over the town, making its feeding invisible to those who would be most capable of stopping it. This selective perception extends even to physical evidence. Blood and evidence of violence that children can see clearly are invisible or easily dismissed by adults. When the losers encounter manifestations of IT, adults who are present do not see them or rationalize them away. This is not simply a matter of adults being too rational to believe in monsters. It is an active, supernatural effect, part of IT's hunting strategy. By making adults blind to its presence, IT ensures that its primary prey children remain vulnerable and unable to get help from the one source that should be able to protect them. The relationship between Derry and IT raises disturbing questions about complicity and collective guilt. Is Derry merely a victim of IT's presence, or has the town benefited from IT in some twisted way? The prosperity of Derry, its survival and growth when other Maine towns have declined, might be seen as evidence of a Faustian bargain. IT feeds, and in return, Derry continues. The citizens do not consciously agree to this arrangement, but their willful blindness, their refusal to acknowledge or confront the evil in their midst, constitutes a form of passive consent. By the time of IT's final defeat in 1985, Derry has been so thoroughly intertwined with the entity that the town cannot survive its destruction. As IT dies, Derry begins to collapse, both metaphorically and literally. The downtown area floods and is partially destroyed. The IT's standpipe collapses. The canal crumbles. It is as if the town was held together by IT's presence, and without it, the foundations, both moral and physical, cannot support what was built upon them. Those who survive the final confrontation leave Derry, unable to remain in a place so thoroughly corrupted by evil. Chapter 5. The 27-Year Cycle. The 27-year cycle of IT's awakening is one of the most distinctive and ominous aspects of the entity's behavior. This precise temporal pattern suggests that IT operates according to biological or supernatural rhythms that are as regular as they are horrifying. Understanding this cycle is crucial to understanding both IT's nature and the unique position of the Losers Club in Derry's dark history. The number 27 itself may hold significance. In numerology and various mystical traditions, 27 is 3 cubed, 3C3X3, a number associated with completeness, cycles, and transformation. Whether Stephen King chose this number for its symbolic resonance or for other reasons, it creates a sense of cosmic order to IT's seemingly chaotic violence. The universe itself appears to be marking time with IT's hunger. Each cycle follows a similar pattern. ET awakens from its hibernation beneath Derry, emerging from the network of tunnels and sewers that honeycombs the ground beneath the town. This awakening is gradual. IT does not immediately appear at full strength. The first signs are subtle, an increase in violent dreams among Derry's residents, a general feeling of unease, small incidents that foreshadow the horror to come. Then the disappearances begin. Its victims are predominantly children, though adults are not entirely safe. The preference for children is both practical and intrinsic to IT's nature. Children's fears are more potent, less tempered by rationalization or experience. Their imaginations are more active, making them better prey for a creature that exists partially in the realm of belief and perception. Moreover, children are more vulnerable, easier to isolate, and less able to mount effective resistance. Society is structured to protect children, but that protection is predicated on adults believing in the danger, and IT makes adults blind. Over the course of approximately 12 to 18 months, IT feeds. The body count rises. Some victims are found dead, their bodies showing signs of violence that the authorities struggle to explain. Others simply vanish, leaving no trace except for the grief of their families and the fading memory of the townspeople. It does not kill every victim immediately. Some it toys with, appearing to them multiple times, building their terror before finally striking. This prolonged stalking serves its purposes, seasoning the fear that makes the meal more satisfying. At the peak of the cycle, typically after IT has fed for about a year, a major catastrophic event often occurs. This is when IT's influence on Derry's population reaches its zenith, when the accumulated evil and madness boil over into mass violence. The Kitchener Ironworks explosion, the Black Spot Fire, the Bradley Gang Massacre. These are not merely incidents that happened to occur when IT was active. They are symptoms of IT's presence, manifestations of the chaos and cruelty that IT either directly causes or amplifies in the human population. Then, as suddenly as it began, the cycle ends. Its hunger is satisfied, or perhaps it simply tires and must rest. It retreats back into its lair beneath the town, entering a hibernation that will last until the cycle begins again. The violence in Derry subsides. The disappearances stop. The town enters a period of relative normalcy, though the scars of the feeding cycle remain in the form of broken families, empty places at dinner tables, and a collective trauma that no one quite acknowledges. Derry's residents do not recognize this pattern. Each cycle is experienced as if it were unique, a tragic anomaly rather than part of a recurring horror. The 27 years between cycles is enough time for memories to fade, for new generations to be born who do not remember the last time. Those who lived through a previous cycle are now middle-aged or elderly, and their memories of the events are hazy, subject to the same supernatural forgetting that IT imposes on all its witnesses. By the time IT awakens again, there is no institutional memory, no preparation, no defense. This amnesia is not natural. It is part of IT's power, a psychic effect that ensures its hunting ground remains viable. If Derry's population retained clear memories of the cyclical horrors, they would either leave or take action to stop it. The town would be abandoned, or organized efforts would be made to confront the source of the evil. But IT prevents this through a combination of its glamour, the effect that makes adults unable to see or remember clearly, and the natural human tendency toward denial and rationalization. The Losers Club represents a unique break in this pattern. When they confront IT in 1958 and wound it severely enough to drive it back into hibernation, they do something unprecedented in Derry's recorded history they remember. Despite the supernatural forgetting that IT imposes, despite moving away from Derry and building adult lives far from Maine, they retain memories of what happened. These memories are suppressed, buried deep, but they persist. This persistence is what allows Mike Hanlon to call them back 27 years later when IT awakens again. The fact that IT must awaken again after 27 years, that it cannot simply remain dormant after being wounded by the losers, suggests limitations to its power. It is bound by its own nature, slave to its hunger and its cycles. It cannot break free from the pattern any more than it can stop being what it is. This regularity, while terrifying in its inevitability, also creates opportunity. If you know when IT will awaken, you can prepare. You can be ready to finish what was started. The 1984-1985 cycle, which culminates in the final confrontation between IT and the Adult Losers Club, breaks the pattern irrevocably. For the first time in its millions or billions of years of existence, IT faces opponents who return deliberately to finish it, who remember what it is and what must be done. The cycle that should have ended with IT retreating into hibernation once more, instead, ends with IT's destruction, breaking not just one cycle, but all future cycles. Derry is finally free, though the price of that freedom is steep. Chapter 6. The Feeding Ground. Its lair beneath the streets of Derry lies a labyrinth of tunnels, sewers, and caverns that serves as IT's lair. This subterranean realm is more than just a physical space. It is a place where reality becomes malleable, where the laws of physics bend to IT's will, and where the boundary between the material world and the deadlights grows dangerously thin. To descend into this lair is to enter IT's domain, where it holds all the advantages, and where human reason and sanity are tested to their breaking points. The sewers of Derry are extensive and old, some sections dating back to the earliest days of the town's development. They form a network that connects virtually every part of the town, a hidden infrastructure that most citizens never think about, but that is essential to the town's functioning. For IT, these tunnels are perfect a vast territory for hunting, with access to every neighborhood, and places to drag victims where their screams cannot be heard. The sewers are simultaneously utterly mundane, just concrete and flowing water, and deeply sinister, a underworld that civilized Derry pretends does not exist. But the sewers are only the outermost layer of IT's lair. Deeper down, beneath even the oldest tunnels, lie caverns that no human engineer designed. These are natural caves, or perhaps not natural at all spaces that IT has created or claimed, where reality becomes increasingly unstable. The losers discover this when they pursue IT into its lair as children. The tunnels become stranger the deeper they go. Gravity seems wrong. Distances do not make sense. They might walk for what feels like hours through passages that should not be able to exist given Derry's geography and geology. At the heart of this labyrinth is IT's true dwelling place, which the losers as children describe as resembling a massive web or nest. Here, reality has given up almost entirely. The space seems both vast and confined, expanding and contracting with IT's will. Bones litter the ground, the remains of hundreds, perhaps thousands of victims, accumulated over centuries. Some of these remains are old enough to crumble at a touch, while others are horrifyingly fresh. The smell is overwhelming, a mixture of decay, sewage, and something else. Something alien and wrong that makes the gut clench and the mind recoil. In this central chamber, IT keeps its eggs. This detail, mentioned but not fully explored in the novel, is particularly disturbing. It is not unique but capable of reproduction, and it has created eggs that will eventually hatch into new entities like itself. The female members of the Losers Club destroy these eggs during the childhood confrontation, and while this seems like a complete victory at the time, it raises questions about IT's life cycle and whether other ITs exist elsewhere in the universe, waiting to hatch or already feeding on other worlds. The lair is also a repository of trophies and victims in various states. Some of IT's victims are not killed but kept alive, or kept in some state between life and death. Their consciousness is trapped in the deadlights, while their bodies remain in the physical world, suspended in a horrifying limbo. The losers encounter these victims, children they knew, friends who vanished, and the sight is almost more than they can bear. These are not corpses, but something worse, living reminders of IT's cruelty, proof that death might not be the worst fate that can befall a person in Derry. The physical properties of the lair reveal much about IT's nature and limitations. While IT can manipulate reality within its domain, it cannot completely override physical law. The lair exists in physical space, beneath real ground. It can be entered and, crucially, exited. Water flows through it, air circulates, and physical objects behave mostly as they should. This suggests that IT's power, while immense, is not absolute. It must work within certain constraints, anchoring itself to physical reality even as it reaches into other dimensions. The journey into the lair, both as children and later as adults, is as much a psychological ordeal as a physical one. The losers must confront not just IT, but their own fears given form. The tunnels seem designed to separate them, to isolate each individual so that IT can pick them off one by one. The darkness is absolute in places, and the sounds dripping water, distant screams, the skittering of things unseen work on the nerves. Time becomes unreliable. They might spend hours in the dark or mere minutes. Without natural light or reliable points of reference, it is impossible to tell. One of the most disturbing aspects of the lair is that it changes between visits. When the adult losers return in 1985, they find that the tunnels are not quite as they remember. New passages exist where there were none, or old passages have changed. This may be IT's doing, reshaping its lair over the years, or it may be evidence that the lair exists partially outside normal space-time, that its configuration is not fixed but fluid. Either way, it means that knowledge of the lair gained in childhood is only partially useful when they return as adults. The lair is also a place of power for IT, but a place of vulnerability. Here, IT is closest to its true form, less hidden behind masks and manifestations. The deadlights are accessible here, which means IT can use them more effectively, but also means that IT is more exposed to those who dare to look upon them. The ritual of Chud, the psychic battle of wills that Bill Denbrough uses to challenge IT directly, can only be performed in this place where the barriers between mental and physical reality are thinnest. When IT is finally defeated, the lair begins to collapse. The passages that were already unstable lose all cohesion. Water from the flooded canals and the Kenduskeag stream pours in, turning the tunnels into a torrent. The losers barely escape with their lives, racing through crumbling passages as the entire subterranean structure threatens to bury them. This destruction is not just physical, but ontological. The lair was held together by IT's presence and power, and with IT gone, it cannot maintain its existence. The foundations of Derry were literally built on IT's lair, and with those foundations destroyed, the town above cannot stand. Part 3. The Losers Club. Chapter 7. 7 Against the Dark. Against an entity as powerful and ancient as IT, 7 children might seem like no opposition at all. Yet the Losers Club, Bill Denbrough, Ben Hanscom, Beverly Marsh, Eddie Kasbrak, Mike Hanlon, Richie Tozier, and Stan Uris accomplish what no one else in Derry's long, dark history has managed. They wound IT severely enough to drive it into early hibernation, and 27 years later, they returned to finish what they started. Understanding why these 7 particular people could challenge IT requires understanding both who they are individually and what they become together. Each member of the Losers Club is an outsider in some way, marginalized by the social hierarchies of childhood and marked by personal trauma or difference. Bill stutters and is consumed by grief and guilt over his brother Georgie's death. Ben is overweight and bullied relentlessly. Beverly comes from an abusive home, her father's violence hovering over her life. Eddie is smothered by his hypochondriac mother's obsessive care, taught to see danger and disease everywhere. Richie hides behind humor and cannot shut up, using constant noise to avoid confronting anything real. Mike is the only African-American child in their friend group, facing racism in 1950s Maine. Stan is Jewish in a predominantly Christian community and possessed of a rationality that makes him uncomfortable with anything that cannot be explained. These individual vulnerabilities are precisely what brings them together and gives them strength against IT. Each of them has already learned to survive in a world that is hostile or indifferent to them. They have developed coping mechanisms and inner strength that most children do not need. When they encounter IT, they are already accustomed to being afraid, to facing threats that adults do not acknowledge or help them with. This prior experience with adversity, paradoxically, prepares them for the ultimate adversity of confronting a cosmic horror. But it is their friendship, the bond they forge as the Losers Club, that truly makes them dangerous to IT. Alone, each of them would be easy prey. Together, they become something greater than the sum of their parts. They support each other emotionally and psychically. When IIT attempts to use one member's fears against them, the others are there to provide courage and perspective. When IIT tries to separate them, they find ways to reunite. The love and loyalty they share creates a kind of psychic shield that IT cannot easily penetrate. Bill Denbrough emerges as the leader of the group, though leadership in the Losers Club is more collegial than hierarchical. Bill's stutter, which he struggles to control, is both a vulnerability and a symbol of his determination. His guilt over Georgie's death drives him to be the one who most actively seeks out IT, who refuses to accept that his brother's death was meaningless or inevitable. Bill's strength is his imagination and his will. As an aspiring writer, he understands the power of stories and belief, and he intuits that these same forces can be used against IT. Ben Hanscom contributes intelligence and practicality. He is the architect of the group, literally and figuratively. When they need to build a dam in the Barrens or understand the geography of Derry, Ben is the one who figures it out. His love for Beverly gives him motivation to be brave when he would otherwise be terrified. His character arc from the fat, bullied child to the successful, fit adult speaks to the power of overcoming internalized shame and claiming one's worth. Beverly Marsh is the only girl in the group, and she faces horrors at home that are all too human alongside the supernatural terror of IT. Her courage is perhaps the most remarkable because she has the least safe place to retreat to. Fighting IT is almost a relief compared to navigating her father's abuse. Beverly's psychic sensitivity makes her particularly vulnerable to the Deadlights, but also gives her insights the others lack. Her role in the group is complex. She is both protected by the boys and a source of strength for them, particularly during the controversial sequence in the sewers that has been rightly criticized and re-examined in discussions of the novel. Eddie Casbrack must overcome not just fear, but his mother's voice in his head, constantly warning him of danger and fragility. His realization that his asthma medication is a placebo, that his mother has been lying to him about the state of his health, is a traumatic betrayal that also liberates him. Eddie's journey is about claiming agency over his own body and life, rejecting the narrative of weakness that has been imposed on him. His bravery in the final confrontation, where he sacrifices himself to help defeat IT, is all the more powerful because it represents a complete repudiation of the fearful life his mother tried to force him into. Mike Hanlon becomes the keeper of Derry's history, the one who stays behind when the others leave. His role is essential to the cycle of return. Mike ensures that the memories are preserved, that the history is recorded, and that when IT awakens again, the losers can be called back. His dedication to this task, living in Derry for 27 years, knowing what lurks beneath it, represents a different kind of courage, the courage to wait and watch and prepare. Richie Tozier's constant jokes and voices serve multiple purposes. They provide comic relief for his friends and readers, but they are also a defense mechanism and a weapon against IT. Laughter undermines fear, and mockery diminishes the power of that which is mocked. Richie's refusal to take anything seriously, even in the face of cosmic horror, is a form of resistance. He denies IT the respect and terror it craves, treating even Pennywise as material for jokes. Stan Uris is the most rational and orderly-minded of the group, which makes his encounters with IT particularly difficult. Stan wants the world to make sense, to follow rules and patterns. IT represents chaos and impossibility, everything Stan's worldview cannot accommodate. Stan's eventual fate, his suicide when called back to Derry as an adult, suggests that some minds cannot bend enough to face certain truths without breaking. His death is tragic precisely because his rationality, which should be a strength, becomes a fatal vulnerability when confronted with something that defies rational explanation. Together, the Losers Club discovers several crucial truths about IT. First, they learn that IT can be hurt, that it bleeds when wounded. This discovery is pivotal because it transforms IT from an invincible force into an enemy that can be fought. Second, they discover that belief and imagination are weapons. The silver slugs that Ben makes and Bill loads into his father's gun are just pieces of metal. But the loser's belief that silver harms monsters makes them effective. This is not delusion or wishful thinking. In the reality where IT exists, belief has power. Third, they learn about the ritual of Chud, a psychic battle derived from the mythology of the Himalayan regions that Bill somehow intuits or learns. This ritual allows one to confront IT directly in the mental realm, to battle it in a contest of wills. Chud is dangerous to lose is to have one's mind trapped in the deadlights forever, but it is also the only way to truly damage IT, to reach past the physical manifestations to the entity itself. The loser's childhood confrontation with IT ends not in complete victory, but in a successful defense. They drive IT back, wound it severely, and destroy its eggs. IT retreats into hibernation, and the cycle of violence ends prematurely. The losers make a blood oath, cutting their hands and joining them together, swearing that if IT ever returns, they will come back to finish it. Then, like everyone else in Derry, they begin to forget, but not completely. The oath binds them across time and distance, a psychic thread that Mike can pull on when needed. 27 years later, 6 of the 7 return. They are adults now, successful in various ways, living lives far from Derry. But they are also, in crucial ways, still those children who faced IT in the Yacha sewers. When Mike calls, they feel the pull of the oath. Most do not remember exactly why they must return, but they know they must. Only Stan resists the call completely, choosing death over return, leaving a message in his own blood for his wife that simply reads, "It." The adult confrontation with IT is different from the childhood encounter. The losers have lost some of the imaginative power they possessed as children. The boundaries between belief and reality are more fixed in their adult minds. But they have gained other strengths: experience, determination, and the understanding that they have already done this once and survived. They also have something IT does not expect. They remember. In IT's long existence, it has never faced opponents who came back deliberately, armed with knowledge of what they are fighting. Chapter 8. The Ritual of Chud. The Ritual of Chud is one of the most enigmatic and crucial elements in the battle against IT. It is a concept that Bill Denbrough somehow knows about, though the source of his knowledge is never fully explained. Perhaps it came to him in dreams, or perhaps it is ancient knowledge that surfaces when needed. The word Chud itself appears to be derived from Himalayan or Tibetan concepts, suggesting a tradition of psychic combat that predates modern civilization. What is clear is that Chud is the only way to truly confront IT on its own terms, in the realm of consciousness where it is most powerful but also most vulnerable. At its core, Chud is a battle of wills conducted in the mental realm. It requires the challenger to enter a kind of trance state and project their consciousness outward to meet IT's consciousness. In this mental space, the combatants engage in what can only be described as psychic combat, each trying to overwhelm the other's will, to break their opponent's sense of self and trap them forever in the deadlights. It is fighting on IT's home ground, using IT's own weapons, and the risks could not be higher. Bill is the primary practitioner of Chud among the losers. His first attempt as a child is partially successful. He manages to enter the mental space where IT dwells and confronts it directly, learning crucial information about IT's nature and weakness. During this confrontation, Bill experiences its true form more directly than physical eyes could capture. He sees the deadlights not just as lights, but as an alien consciousness, ancient and hungry, that regards him with a kind of amused contempt. It believes Bill is just another child, another meal, and is surprised by the strength of Bill's will. The mechanics of Chud involve more than just mental projection. There is a physical component. The combatants must hold each other's tongue in their mouths, creating a circuit of connection that allows the mental battle to take place. This grotesque physical intimacy symbolizes the complete interpenetration of consciousness that Chud requires. There is no distance, no safety in the ritual. To perform Chud is to become utterly vulnerable to one's opponent. During the childhood Chud, Bill learns several crucial things. He discovers that IT came from outside our reality, that it is alien and ancient. He learns about the turtle, a cosmic entity that opposes IT and that helped create our universe. The turtle becomes an ally of sorts, offering Bill cryptic advice and assistance, though it is clear that the turtle cannot or will not directly intervene. The turtle's existence suggests a larger cosmic order, a balance between creative and destructive forces, with IT representing pure consumption and chaos. The turtle tells Bill that he and his friends must rely on the other, a mystical power that represents creation, belief, and imagination. The other is described ambiguously. It might be God, or it might be some other creative force in the universe. What is clear is that it stands in opposition to IT, and that it can be accessed through acts of imagination, creation, and sincere belief. The loser's ability to hurt IT with their silver slugs is an example of the other at work. Their belief that silver harms monsters makes it true because they are tapping into a creative power that can reshape reality. The adult version of Chud, performed by Bill during the final confrontation, is both similar and different. Bill is older now, his imagination less fluid, his boundaries between belief and reality more firmly established. This makes the ritual harder in some ways. But he also has the experience of having done it before, the knowledge of what to expect, and the absolute determination that comes from knowing this is the final battle. There will be no third chance. During the final Chud, Bill travels further into the mental realm than before. He ventures into what can only be described as IT's mindscape, a realm of impossible geometries and colors that should not exist. Here, he witnesses IT's memories. If memories is even the right word, impressions of IT's journey from the Macroverse to Earth, of the eons it has spent feeding, of the countless victims it has consumed. The experience is nearly overwhelming, threatening to shatter Bill's sense of self. But Bill has something it does not: the support of his friends. Even in the mental realm, he can feel their presence, their love and loyalty, providing an anchor that keeps him from being lost. The loser's bond is not just emotional, but psychic, a connection forged through shared trauma and sealed by the blood oath they took as children. This connection allows them to pool their strength, their belief, and their will, creating a united front that IT cannot easily overcome. One of the most significant discoveries Bill makes during the final Chud is its true vulnerability. It cannot understand love or loyalty. It knows fear in all its forms, has studied and fed on fear for eons, but love is alien to it. The bonds between the losers, the sacrifices they are willing to make for each other, represent a power that IT cannot counter with its usual weapons. When Eddie Kasbrak sacrifices himself to help wound IT, or when Richie risks everything to stay with Bill during the ritual, they are wielding a weapon that IT has no defense against. The climax of Chud involves Bill finding It's heart not a physical organ, but the core of its being in the mental realm. This heart is described as a great black door or wall, the boundary of IT's existence. Bill must somehow get beyond this boundary, must penetrate to the very center of what IT is. With the help of his friends and perhaps the other itself, Bill manages to do this, gripping its heart and squeezing, asserting his will over IT's, commanding it to die and believe in its death. The death of IT is not instantaneous or certain. Even as Bill crushes its heart, IT fights back with everything it has. The mental battle reaches a crescendo where Bill's entire existence is on the line. One slip, one moment of doubt, and he will be lost forever. But Bill does not falter. Backed by his friends, driven by the memory of Georgie and all the other victims, and armed with the power of belief and imagination, he holds on. Its resistance gradually weakens. Its consciousness begins to fragment and fade, and finally, impossibly, E.T. dies. Chapter 9. The Power of Belief and Imagination. At the heart of the Losers Club's victory over IT lies a principle that is both simple and profound. Belief has power. This is not belief as abstract philosophy or religious faith, though it connects to both. This is belief as a creative force, imagination as a tool for reshaping reality. In the world of IT, what you believe strongly enough becomes true, and this principle applies to both the monster and those who fight it. E.T. itself is a creature of belief and imagination. Its shape-shifting ability works through the fears and beliefs of its victims. When a child believes in werewolves or mummies or lepers, IT can become those things because the belief gives it form and substance. E.T. feeds not just on fear as an emotion, but on fear as a reality-shaping force. The more intensely a victim believes in and fears their particular monster, the more real and powerful that manifestation becomes. But this principle works both ways. If belief can make IT's manifestations real, then belief can also create weapons against IT. This is the secret that the losers stumble upon, almost accidentally at first. When they fashion silver slugs to use against IT, they are not working with any objective, magical principle. Silver has no inherent power against interdimensional entities, but in folklore and pop culture, silver harms monsters, werewolves, vampires, and other creatures of darkness. The losers believe this strongly enough that it becomes true. The scene where they shoot IT with these silver slugs is crucial to understanding the metaphysics of belief in the story. Bill loads the homemade slugs into his father's gun, takes aim at Pennywise, and fires. The slugs hit IT and cause real damage. IT bleeds and recoils in pain. This should not work. The slugs are just metal, hastily melted down and formed by children who have no idea what they are doing. But it does work because all 7 losers believe it will work. Their combined belief creates a reality where silver harms weight. This revelation is both empowering and disturbing. It means that reality in Derry, or at least in the realm where IT operates, is more malleable than most people realize. The firmly fixed world of adult perception, where things are what they are and belief changes nothing, is revealed as a limitation rather than truth. Children, with their more fluid boundaries between imagination and reality, can access this power more easily than adults. This is why IT primarily fears children, and why the losers were more powerful in some ways when they first fought IT as children. The loss of this power is one of the costs of growing up. As the losers become adults, they lose some of their ability to believe truly and completely. The world becomes more fixed, more rational, less open to the power of imagination. When they return to Derry as adults, they must work harder to access the belief that came naturally to them as children. They must consciously choose to believe, to embrace the irrational, to let their imaginations run wild in ways that feel foolish or childish to their adult minds. Yet they manage it, because the stakes demand it. Confronted with IT's undeniable reality, they cannot afford the luxury of adult skepticism. They must believe in the impossible because the impossible is trying to kill them. This forced regression to childlike belief is painful and difficult, requiring them to temporarily set aside the carefully constructed adult personas they have built. But it is also necessary and ultimately liberating. By believing again, they reclaim a power they had lost. The principle of belief extends beyond just weapons. It affects how IT can harm them. If they refuse to believe in IT's power, if they deny the reality of its manifestations strongly enough, IT cannot hurt them as easily. This is demonstrated multiple times when a loser faces down one of IT's forms and simply refuses to accept what they are seeing. The werewolf isn't real. The leper isn't real. Even Pennywise isn't real, not in the way he appears. By denying its chosen forms, they force IT to work harder, to expend more energy, and sometimes to reveal cracks in the illusion. But belief as a weapon has limitations and dangers. It requires absolute commitment. Half-hearted belief accomplishes nothing. Doubt undermines everything. This is part of why Stan's more rational, skeptical mindset makes him vulnerable to IT. Stan wants proof, wants logical explanations, and IT thrives on the opposite of logic. His inability to fully embrace the irrational power of belief may contribute to his eventual decision to avoid the final confrontation entirely. The deeper philosophical question raised by the power of belief in IT is, what does this say about the nature of reality? Is reality more subjective than we typically assume? Or is the malleability of reality in Derry specific to IT's presence, a localized effect of its alien nature? The novel suggests both may be true. Its very presence destabilizes reality, makes it more plastic and responsive to consciousness. But perhaps it is also revealing something that is always true but usually hidden, that consciousness shapes reality more than we realize, and that the reason most people cannot perform miracles is simply that they do not believe they can. This connects to the concept of the other that the turtle mentions to Bill. The other is described as a creative force, perhaps the force of creation itself. It is what makes imagination real, what transforms belief into reality. It is opposed to the other where IT consumes and destroys. The other creates and builds. The losers, by believing and imagining, are channeling the other's power, setting it against IT in a cosmic clash between creation and destruction. The ultimate expression of belief as power comes in the final confrontation when Bill, during Chud, commands IT to die and believe in its own death. This is not just killing IT, but making IT believe it is dying, undermining IT's own existence through the same mechanism IT uses to terrorize others. If belief can make things real, then making IT believe in its own demise is perhaps the only way to truly destroy something that has existed for eons and survived everything else thrown at it. Bill does not just defeat IT, he makes IT defeat itself through the power of belief turned inward. Part 4. Cosmic Horror and the King Multiverse. Chapter 10. It in the Context of the Dark Tower. While It can be read as a standalone novel, its full significance emerges when we understand it as part of Stephen King's larger literary universe, particularly its connections to the Dark Tower series. The Dark Tower is King's magnum opus, a sprawling epic that ties together many of his novels into a single cosmology. In this multiverse, IT occupies a significant position as one of the great evils that threatens the fabric of reality itself. The most explicit connection between IT and the Dark Tower comes through references to the Prim, the Macroverse, and the Todash darkness. These are different terms for aspects of the same fundamental reality, the chaos that existed before our ordered universe, the spaces between worlds, the void from which both creative and destructive forces emerge. It is described as a creature of the prim, something that predates our reality and exists outside its normal laws. In Dark Tower terms, IT would be classified as one of the old ones, the ancient entities that roamed the universe before the coming of civilization and order. The turtle that Bill encounters during the ritual of Chud is explicitly connected to the Dark Tower mythology. In those books, we learn about the Beam Guardians, enormous entities that maintain the structure of reality by holding up the beams that support the Dark Tower itself. The turtle is one of these guardians, also known as Maturin. Maturin's role in IT is relatively minor. He offers advice and perhaps some protection to Bill, but his very presence establishes that the events in Derry are not isolated. They are part of a larger cosmic struggle between order and chaos, creation and destruction. By the time of the adult confrontation with IT, the turtle is dead, having choked on a galaxy, as is cryptically revealed. This detail, which seems almost comically bizarre out of context, is deeply significant. If a being powerful enough to help create universes can die, what does that say about the stability of reality? The turtle's death also means that Bill and the losers cannot rely on cosmic allies in their final battle. They must face IT with only their own power and the ambiguous aid of the other. Its relationship to the Crimson King, the main antagonist of the Dark Tower series, is never explicitly defined but can be inferred. Both are creatures of chaos and destruction. Both seek to break down the barriers of reality, and both are opposed by the creative force that manifests as the other, or Gan, the tower's name for the creative deity. IT and the Crimson King may be allies of a sort, or they may simply be parallel threats, two manifestations of the same fundamental principle of entropy and evil. The concept of Ka, which is central to the Dark Tower series, applies to IT as well. Ka is fate, destiny, the wheel of fortune and causation that governs events. The Losers Club is a Ka-tet, a group bound together by destiny to fulfill a particular purpose. Their meeting, their friendship, their confrontation with IT, all of this is Ka. They were meant to be the ones to challenge IT, and their story is written in the larger narrative of the multiverse. This does not mean they lack free will, but it does mean that some events have a weight of destiny behind them that makes them nearly inevitable. The number 19, which has special significance in the Dark Tower series, also appears in IT, though less prominently. 19 is associated with the structure of the tower and the beams, with important events and powerful magic. The losers are not 19 in number, and the 27-year cycle does not obviously relate to 19, but careful readers can find the number woven into the background of IT's story, another thread connecting it to King's larger mythology. Understanding IT in the context of the Dark Tower also helps explain some of its more puzzling aspects. Why can IT be hurt by belief and imagination? Because in the Dark Tower universe, reality itself is somewhat mutable, shaped by consciousness and will, especially near places where the fabric of reality is thin. Derry is such a place, a weak point in the barriers between worlds, which is why IT was able to enter our reality there, and why the laws of physics seem more negotiable in Derry than elsewhere. The deadlights take on additional meaning when viewed through the Dark Tower lens. They may be IT's true form, but they are also a kind of portal or window into the Todash darkness, the space between worlds. To look into the deadlights is to glimpse the chaos and void that underlies reality, the nothing from which everything comes, and to which everything may return. This is why the experience is so damaging to human consciousness. It is confronting the fundamental unreality of existence. The fact that our ordered world is a thin shell over an abyss. Other entities in King's multiverse share characteristics with IT. Dandelo, from the Dark Tower series, is another creature that feeds on emotions, in its case on laughter. The Can Toy and the Tahain, servants of the Crimson King, are shapeshifters of a sort. Tak, from Desperation and the Regulators, is another possessing, shape-shifting evil. These parallels suggest that IT is not unique, but representative of a type predatory entities from outside our reality that must take on forms comprehensible to humans in order to interact with our world, and that feed on human suffering in various ways. The defeat of IT may have implications beyond Derry. If IT was part of the larger forces arrayed against the Dark Tower and the structure of reality, then its destruction represents a victory in the cosmic war between order and chaos. One less old one haunts the spaces between worlds. One less servant of entropy threatens the tower. The Losers Club, without knowing it, has served a purpose far larger than saving their town. They have struck a blow for all of reality. Chapter 11. The Nature of Evil in Stephen King's Universe. IT embodies a particular conception of evil that recurs throughout Stephen King's work. Evil as a fundamental force in the universe, something that exists independently of human action or morality. This is evil as ontological reality rather than as moral failing. It is not evil because it chooses to be cruel or because it violates moral laws. It is evil because its very existence is antithetical to human flourishing, because its nature is to consume and destroy, because there is no possibility of redemption or reform. This conception of evil stands in contrast to the humanistic view that evil is a product of human choices, social conditions, or psychological damage. While King's works certainly explore those forms of evil as well, Beverly's abusive father, the town bully Henry Bowers, the racism that leads to the Black Spot Fire IT, represents something more primal and absolute. It was evil before humans existed, will be evil after we are gone, and cannot be talked out of its nature or reformed through better social conditions. Yet, IT is not a devil or demon in the traditional Judeo-Christian sense. It has no interest in souls, no moral agenda, no desire to corrupt or damn. It simply feeds. This makes IT more terrifying in some ways than a traditional supernatural antagonist. A devil can be resisted through faith, a demon through exorcism, but IT requires something different, not rejection of evil through moral purity, but opposition through imagination and belief, through asserting a counter-reality to the one IT represents. The relationship between IT and human evil is complex. IT does not create the racism, abuse, cruelty, and violence present in Derry, but it amplifies these tendencies. It is a catalyst for human monstrosity, lowering inhibitions and providing opportunities for the worst human impulses to manifest. The Bradley Gang massacre might have happened without IT, but IT's presence made it more likely and more extreme. The abuse that Beverly suffers would exist regardless of IT, but IT uses that abuse, feeds on Beverly's fear of her father, and potentially influences her father toward even greater violence. This raises disturbing questions about accountability and free will in Derry. When someone commits an act of violence during one of IT's active periods, how much of that is their own choice and how much is IT's influence? The novel suggests that IT cannot make someone do something completely against their nature, but it can encourage, suggest, and provide circumstances that make evil acts easier. The people of Derry are not mere puppets, they bear responsibility for their actions, but they are also not operating in a normal moral environment. The glamour that IT casts over Derry, making adults unable to see or remember the full extent of the horrors occurring around them, is itself a form of evil. It enables violence by preventing intervention. It isolates victims by ensuring their cries for help will not be heard or believed. This passive evil, the evil of willful blindness and deliberate ignorance, may be as damaging as IT's active predation. When adults in Derry fail to respond appropriately to child murders, when they explain away obvious atrocities, when they simply do not want to know, they are not entirely blameless, even though IT has influenced them. The other, as the force opposed to IT, represents a different philosophical position on the nature of good and evil. If it is pure consumption and destruction, the other is pure creation and generation. The novel suggests that these are the fundamental polarities of existence, not good and evil in the moral sense, but creation and destruction as cosmic principles. Good, in this framework, is whatever serves life, growth, imagination, and connection. Evil is whatever serves death, decay, and isolation. The Losers Club embodies the principles associated with the other. Their friendship is creative. It generates support, courage, and joy in the midst of horror. Their willingness to sacrifice for each other, to face terrible danger to protect their friends, represents a life-affirming principle. Even their youthful hijinks and fun, their summer in the barrens building dams and telling stories, is a form of creation that stands against IT's destruction. They make things, build things, and support each other, and in doing so, they are warriors for the other even before they consciously choose to fight IT. But King does not present the conflict as entirely black and white. The other, as described through the turtle, is not all-powerful or reliably helpful. The turtle tells Bill that he and his friends are on their own, that the other will not directly intervene. This suggests that the universe, while not neutral, is also not rigged in favor of good. Evil entities like IT have real power and freedom to act. Defeating them requires effort, sacrifice, and courage from those who are willing to stand against them. The universe may favor creation over destruction in some ultimate sense, but it does not guarantee victory to those fighting for good. The permanence of IT's defeat is left somewhat ambiguous. The losers succeed in killing IT, and Derry begins to collapse and decay without IT's presence holding it together. But the larger implications remain unclear. Are there other ITs elsewhere in the universe? Can something like IT be permanently destroyed, or will it reform somehow, somewhere? The novel suggests that this particular entity is finished, but the principle it represents, entropy, chaos, consumption, is eternal. As long as reality exists, there will be forces that seek to unmake it. King's treatment of evil in IT is ultimately both pessimistic and hopeful. Pessimistic because it acknowledges that evil is real, powerful, and ineradicable from existence. There will always be another monster, another threat, another darkness to fight. But hopeful because it also shows that evil can be resisted and defeated through courage, imagination, and solidarity. The losers do not destroy evil itself, that would be impossible, but they destroy this particular evil, save countless future victims, and prove that even cosmic horrors can be made to bleed. Part 5. Themes and Interpretations. Chapter 12. Childhood, Memory, and Trauma. At its heart, it is a novel about childhood, its joys, its terrors, and the loss of innocence that comes with growing up. The Losers Club's summer of 1958, despite being marked by their confrontation with an interdimensional monster, is also portrayed as a time of intense friendship, freedom, and discovery. They build dams, tell stories, ride bikes, and experience the particular intensity of childhood friendships that feel like they will last forever. This juxtaposition of innocence and horror is central to the novel's power. King suggests that childhood is a time of particular power children can imagine, believe, and perceive in ways that adults cannot. This is why IT feeds primarily on children, but also why children are capable of wounding IT. The boundless imagination of childhood, the willingness to believe in possibilities that adults have learned to dismiss, is both a vulnerability and a weapon. Children live in a world where the line between real and imaginary is blurred, where belief has creative power, and where anything seems possible. But childhood is also a time of genuine vulnerability and danger. The losers are not just facing IT, they are navigating a world where adult protection is unreliable or absent. Beverly deals with an abusive father. Eddie is smothered by his mother's pathological control. Ben is bullied relentlessly. Mike faces racism. The adults who should protect them either cannot or will not, leaving the children to fend for themselves. It is the supernatural manifestation of a truth that is already present in their lives. Children are at risk, and adults cannot always save them. The structure of the novel, alternating between 1958 and 1985, between childhood and adulthood, emphasizes the relationship between past and present, between who we were and who we become. The adult losers are successful in conventional terms. They have careers, relationships, and lives far from Derry. But they are also haunted by what they experienced and have lost something essential in the process of growing up. Their return to Derry is as much about reclaiming their childhood selves as it is about defeating IT. Memory is revealed as both unreliable and essential. The losers forget much of what happened to them in 1958, a forgetting that is both natural the way childhood memories fade and supernatural, part of IT's protective glamour. Yet they also retain crucial memories, especially when they return to Derry and the old associations trigger recall. Walking the streets of their childhood, visiting the barrens, returning to the places where they fought IT, all of this brings the memories flooding back, often with painful intensity. This recovered memory is double-edged. It provides the knowledge needed to fight IT again, the understanding of what they are facing and how to combat it. But it also forces the adult losers to confront traumas they had buried, to relive terrors that their adult minds are less equipped to handle than their child selves were. Stan Uris cannot bear this prospect and chooses death instead. The others push through, but the cost is significant. they must allow themselves to become children again in crucial ways, setting aside adult defenses and rationality. The novel explores trauma not just in the immediate sense of IT's attacks, but in the longer-term psychological sense. The losers carry their childhood experiences with them, shaping their adult lives in ways they do not fully recognize until they return to Derry. Bill's guilt over Georgie drives his entire life, informing his career as a horror writer and his relationships. Beverly's history of abuse leads her into an abusive marriage, repeating the patterns she learned from her father. Eddie marries a woman who resembles his mother in her controlling behavior. The past, whether we remember it clearly or not, continues to shape us. The friendship of the Losers Club represents the best of childhood loyalty, acceptance, and a pure form of love that is not yet complicated by sexuality, career ambition, or the compromises of adult life. They accept each other completely, flaws and all. They will do anything for each other. This bond is what allows them to defeat IT, because IT cannot understand or combat such pure solidarity. But it is also something that cannot be fully sustained into adulthood. By the end of the novel, they know they will forget again, that they will return to their adult lives and lose touch. The adult world does not accommodate the kind of total friendship they shared as children. King suggests that growing up requires losses that are perhaps necessary, but certainly painful. Adults gain practical competence, rational thinking, and the ability to function in complex social structures. But they lose the imaginative power, the capacity for true belief, and the intense emotional connections of childhood. The losers must temporarily reclaim these lost capacities to defeat IT, but they cannot keep them. Once IT is defeated and they leave Derry, they will forget again, becoming fully adult in ways that preclude the magic they wielded together. This bittersweet view of childhood and memory is perhaps King's most profound statement in the novel. We cannot remain children, we must grow up, must develop adult consciousness and capability. But in doing so, we lose something precious and irretrievable. The best we can hope for is to carry forward the essential lessons of childhood. The courage to face what frightens us, the loyalty to stand by our friends, and the imaginative power to believe in better possibilities even in the face of overwhelming darkness. Chapter 13. The Failure of Adults and Authority. One of the most disturbing aspects of IT is the systematic failure of every adult and authority figure to protect the children of Derry. Parents, police, teachers, doctors, all the people and institutions that should form a protective web around children either do not see the danger, actively contribute to it, or stand by uselessly while children suffer and die. This failure is both a realistic portrayal of how institutions can fail vulnerable populations and a supernatural effect of IT's presence, making it all the more horrifying. The police department is particularly ineffective. When children disappear or are found murdered, the investigations are perfunctory at best. Chief Rademacher and his officers seem more concerned with maintaining order and avoiding panic than with actually solving the crimes or preventing future ones. They accept the most implausible explanations for events, declining to ask obvious questions or pursue clear leads. This is partly IT's supernatural influence, the glamour that makes adults unable to fully perceive or remember IT's actions. But it also reflects a realistic pattern of institutional neglect and incompetence. Parents fail their children in various ways. Beverly's father is directly abusive, his violence escalating as IT's influence grows stronger. Eddie's mother is smothering and controlling, keeping him weak and dependent through lies about his health. Bill's parents are so consumed by grief over Georgie that they have little attention left for their surviving son. Even the more functional parents in the novel are unable to protect their children from IT because they cannot see or acknowledge the danger. Their love and good intentions are useless against a threat they have been made unable to perceive. The school system provides no safety. Teachers are oblivious to the bullying and violence that occurs under their supervision. The same students terrorize others year after year with no meaningful intervention. When Henry Bowers and his gang assault other children, when Beverly is harassed and threatened, when Mike is targeted for racist violence, the adults in charge either do not notice or do not care enough to act effectively. School should be a place of safety and learning, but in Derry it is just another hunting ground where children are vulnerable. Medical professionals also fail the children. Eddie's doctor goes along with his mother's lies about his asthma, prescribing placebos rather than confronting her psychological abuse. When children show signs of trauma, or when their stories about what they have seen should raise alarm bells, doctors dismiss or rationalize. The medical establishment, which should be a backstop protecting children from harm, is instead complicit in their suffering through neglect and willful blindness. This comprehensive failure of adult protection forces the losers to become self-reliant in ways that are both empowering and tragic. They cannot turn to adults for help, so they must help themselves and each other. They form their own protective structure, their own rules and loyalties. This is empowering because it gives them agency and proves their capability. But it is tragic because children should not have to fight monsters literal or metaphorical without adult support. The necessity of their self-reliance reflects a failure of the entire adult world. The novel suggests several reasons for this adult failure. First, there is IT's supernatural influence, the glamour that makes adults unable to see or remember clearly. But this cannot be the only explanation, because adults fail in ways that go beyond simply not seeing IT. They fail to protect children from each other, from abusive parents, from dangerous situations that have nothing to do with IT. This suggests that the adult failure is both supernatural and natural, that IT amplifies a tendency toward neglect and blindness that already exists. Second, there is simple self-interest and cowardice. Many adults in Derry might suspect that something is wrong, might have moments when the glamour slips and they glimpse the truth, but they choose not to look too closely because investigating would be uncomfortable or dangerous. It is easier to accept official explanations, to trust that authorities are handling things, to focus on one's own life and problems. This willful ignorance is a choice, even if it is a choice made under supernatural influence. Third, there is the loss of imagination and belief that comes with adulthood. Adults have learned to dismiss the impossible, to trust only what can be rationally explained. When confronted with IT, their adult minds simply cannot process what they are seeing. Children are more open to the irrational and impossible, which makes them both better prey for IT and more capable of fighting it. Adults have traded imaginative power for rational competence, and in doing so have made themselves less able to perceive certain categories of threat. The few adults who do try to help are either ineffective or meet bad ends. The librarian who helps Mike with his research provides information but cannot directly confront IT. Bill's father gives him the gun that he uses against IT, but does not understand what it will be used for. The adult who comes closest to understanding, Mike Hanlon as an adult staying in Derry, is traumatized and broken by his knowledge, able to preserve the memories and call the others back, but not able to fight IT directly. This systematic failure of adult protection is perhaps King's darkest commentary on American society. He suggests that our institutions and authority figures are fundamentally unable or unwilling to protect the most vulnerable, whether through supernatural influence or natural human failings, and the novel suggests it is both the structures we create to safeguard children are inadequate. The children must save themselves, because no one else will save them. Yet the novel also shows what children can accomplish when forced to be self-reliant. The losers do not just survive IT, they defeat it, at least temporarily, accomplishing something that no adult in Derry's history has managed. This is empowering, and speaks to the resilience and capability of children when given no other choice. But King does not romanticize this necessity. The losers should not have had to fight IT. They should have been protected. Their victory is impressive, but also represents a failure of every system that should have made such a victory unnecessary. Chapter 14. Confronting Fear Itself. At the most fundamental level, IT is a story about fear and how we confront it. It feeds on fear, using it as both sustenance and weapon. Its victims are first terrorized and then consumed, their fear literally making them more appealing prey. But the novel also shows that fear can be overcome, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it, and that sometimes the only way through horror is to face it directly. Each member of the Losers Club has specific fears that IT exploits. Eddie fears disease and contamination, so IT appears as a leper. Beverly fears her father's violence and what it might escalate to, so IT manifests her worst nightmares about what could happen to her. Mike fears the racist violence that claimed his father's friends, so IT shows him horrors tied to that history. Stan fears chaos and irrationality, so IT presents him with impossibilities that his orderly mind cannot accept. These personalized horrors are more effective than generic scares because they go straight to each individual's deepest vulnerabilities. But the losers discover something crucial. Fear has power only if you give it power. When they stand together and refuse to flee, when they face IT despite their terror, they find that they can resist. The fear does not go away. They remain terrified throughout most of their encounters with IT, but they learn to act anyway. Courage, in King's formulation, is not feeling unafraid but choosing action despite fear. Each confrontation with IT is an exercise in this kind of courage, choosing to advance when everything in their bodies and minds screams at them to run. The novel draws a distinction between rational and irrational fear. Rational fear is useful, it keeps us alive by warning us of genuine danger. The loser's fear of IT is entirely rational. IT is genuinely dangerous and has killed many children. But IT also amplifies fear beyond the rational, using psychological terror to paralyze and overwhelm. The losers must learn to distinguish between the fear that warns and the fear that disables, accepting the former while resisting the latter. Laughter emerges as one weapon against fear. Richie's constant jokes, while sometimes inappropriate or annoying to his friends, serve a crucial function. They break the tension, puncture the solemnity that fear demands, and refuse to grant IT the respect and dread it seeks. You cannot be wholly terrified while laughing, and laughter is a communal experience that brings people together. When the losers laugh together, even in the face of horror, they are asserting that there is more to existence than fear and death. The power of belief works both ways with fear. It uses the loser's belief in its manifestations to make those manifestations powerful and dangerous. When Eddie sees the leper and believes in its diseased reality, the leper becomes more real and threatening. But belief can also be turned against IT. When the losers believe that they can hurt IT, that silver slugs will work, that their friendship and courage are stronger than its malevolence, those beliefs become weapons. The same psychological mechanism that makes fear powerful can make courage powerful. The novel suggests that unacknowledged fear is more dangerous than fear that is confronted. The adults of Derry do not consciously acknowledge what is happening, and this failure to name and confront their fear makes them complicit in IT's predation. The losers, by contrast, talk about their fears openly with each other. They admit when they are scared, discuss what frightens them, and support each other through terror. This openness does not eliminate the fear, but it prevents fear from isolating them, which is one of IT's most effective strategies. The adult loser's return to Derry involves confronting not just IT, but their own fears about growing up, about failure, about death. As adults, they have developed more sophisticated fears than they had as children. They fear losing their careers, relationships, and social status. They fear death more concretely, understanding mortality in ways children do not. But they also have something they lacked as children, the knowledge that they have confronted the ultimate fear before and survived. This prior victory gives them a foundation of confidence, even as their adult anxieties make the confrontation harder in other ways. The ritual of Chud can be understood as the ultimate confrontation with fear. In Chud, there is no physical safety, no possibility of running away. It is a pure battle of wills conducted in the mental realm, where fear is all there is. To participate in Chud requires accepting the possibility of complete annihilation, not just death, but the erasure of self, consciousness trapped forever in the deadlights. That Bill can perform this ritual, can accept these stakes and still fight, represents the pinnacle of courage in the novel. Yet King does not present fear as something that can be permanently overcome. Even after defeating IT, the losers remain capable of fear. They will face other fears in their lives, other challenges and traumas. But they have proven to themselves that fear can be confronted and overcome, that courage is possible even in the face of cosmic horror. This lesson, more than the specific defeat of IT, is perhaps what they carry forward into their adult lives. They know themselves to be capable of bravery, and that knowledge is itself a form of power. Conclusion. The Eternal Return. The story of it, Pennywise and the Deadlights, is ultimately a story about cycles, the 27-year cycle of IT's awakening, the cycle of childhood and adulthood, the cycle of memory and forgetting, the cycle of trauma and healing. Stephen King has created not just a horror novel, but a meditation on time, memory, and the recurring patterns that define human existence. The Losers Club breaks one cycle by defeating IT permanently, but they cannot break all cycles. Life continues with its own rhythms and returns. What makes it enduringly powerful, both as a novel and as a cultural touchstone, is its operation on multiple levels. On the surface, it is a horror story about a monster that kills children straightforward, terrifying, effective. But beneath that surface lie layers of meaning. It is about trauma and how it shapes us. It is about the failures of institutions and the necessity of self-reliance. It is about the power of friendship and the pain of growing up. It is about imagination, belief, and the fundamental question of what makes something real. The Deadlights, IT's true form, represent something that recurs throughout horror literature and mythology, the truth that cannot be looked upon directly without madness or death. From Medusa's gaze to Lovecraft's cosmic horrors to the true name of God in certain mystical traditions, there is a persistent idea that reality contains truths too vast and alien for human consciousness to safely contain. The Deadlights embody this idea literally, a visual representation of a truth so incompatible with human cognition that perception of it causes breakdown. Pennywise, by contrast, is the lie, the mask, the performance, the pretense that IT is something comprehensible and approachable. Pennywise is designed to lure and deceive, to present an interface that human consciousness can interact with, even as that interface leads to destruction. The relationship between Pennywise and the Deadlights, between the comfortable lie and the unbearable truth, might be read as a metaphor for how we navigate existence itself. We create narratives and personas that make reality manageable, but behind these constructions lurk truths we would rather not confront. The defeat of IT raises as many questions as it answers. Was it truly destroyed or merely banished? Could other entities like IT exist elsewhere? Has the destruction of IT in Derry eliminated the possibility of similar horrors occurring elsewhere, or was this victory purely local? King leaves these questions deliberately unresolved, suggesting that absolute answers about cosmic evil are not available to human consciousness. We can defeat particular manifestations of evil, but evil itself remains an eternal possibility. The forgetting that claims the losers after their victory is bittersweet. On one hand, it represents a merciful release from traumatic memories, allowing them to return to normal lives without being consumed by what they have experienced. On the other hand, it represents loss, the loss of their childhood friendship, the loss of knowledge that might have been valuable, the loss of a defining experience that shaped who they are. This tension between memory and forgetting, between bearing witness and moving on, is one that trauma survivors navigate in every era. The collapse of Derry after IT's death suggests that some places are so corrupted by evil that they cannot survive its removal. The town was built on and around IT's presence, sustained by it in some twisted way. With IT gone, the foundations, literal and metaphorical, cannot support what was built upon them. This is a grim commentary on how evil can become structural, woven into the very fabric of a place or institution, such that removing it causes collapse rather than healing. Yet there is hope in the novel's conclusion. The losers have proven that even cosmic horrors can be fought and defeated. They have demonstrated that friendship, courage, and imagination are real powers that can prevail against ancient evil. They have shown that adults, by reclaiming something essential from childhood, can access capabilities they thought they had lost. These victories, though costly, affirm something fundamental about human potential and resilience. The legacy of IT extends far beyond the pages of King's novel. Pennywise has become one of the most recognizable monsters in popular culture, his image emblematic of a particular kind of creepy horror. The two major film adaptations, the 1990 miniseries and the 2017-2019 film duology, have introduced IT to new generations, each bringing their own interpretation while remaining true to the core themes of King's work. The fear of clowns, while present before IT, was certainly amplified by Pennywise, to the point where many people trace their coulrophobia directly to encounters with King's creation. But beyond the surface-level impact on horror culture, IT has influenced how we think about childhood trauma, institutional failure, and the nature of evil. The novel appeared at a time when American society was beginning to take child abuse more seriously, when institutional failures to protect children were being acknowledged, and when the dark underside of seemingly idyllic small-town America was being exposed. IT captured these cultural anxieties and gave them form, making abstract social concerns visceral and terrifying. The novel's exploration of memory and trauma has proven particularly resonant. The idea that traumatic memories can be buried but not erased, that they shape us even when we do not consciously recall them, and that confronting them directly may be necessary for healing these concepts have become central to our understanding of psychological trauma. The loser's journey from childhood trauma through adult repression to final confrontation and resolution mirrors therapeutic processes that many people undertake. IIT also speaks to something timeless about the human condition: our need for friendship and connection, our struggle with fear, our journey from childhood innocence through adult complexity, and back to something like wisdom. The Losers Club represents an ideal of friendship that many people recognize from their own childhoods. Those intense bonds that feel like they will last forever, but often fade as adult responsibilities intrude. The tragedy is that the losers cannot maintain their connection, but the triumph is that it existed at all, and that it gave them the strength to do what needed doing. In the end, the lore of IT, the mythology of Pennywise, the Deadlights, the Turtle, the 27-year cycle, and all the rest is a framework for exploring questions that have preoccupied humanity since we first became capable of asking them. What is the nature of evil? How do we confront fear? What is lost and gained in growing up? How do we maintain connection in the face of time and change? Can evil be defeated, or only temporarily held at bay? What price are we willing to pay to protect the innocent? These are not questions that have easy answers, and King does not pretend to provide them. What he offers instead is a story, a long, complex, terrifying, heartbreaking, and ultimately hopeful story about 7 friends who faced the ultimate evil and prevailed. Their victory was not clean or complete. It cost them dearly in both childhood and adulthood. But it was a victory nonetheless. Proof that even in a universe that contains entities like IT, even in a world where institutions fail and adults are blind, human courage and connection can make a difference. The Deadlights may represent a truth beyond human comprehension, and Pennywise may be a lie designed to deceive and destroy. But between these extremes, the losers find their own truth that love is real, that courage is possible, that evil can be confronted, and that growing up does not mean forgetting everything that mattered when we were young. Some lessons from childhood must be carried forward, even if we cannot carry all of them. Some battles must be fought, even if we would prefer to look away. Some friends must be stood by, even if doing so requires us to face our deepest fears. This, perhaps more than any specific element of the lore, is what makes IT endure. It speaks to something essential in the human experience, our vulnerability to fear and evil, our capacity for courage and love, our need for connection, and our ongoing struggle to maintain our humanity in the face of forces that would strip it away. It is a story about monsters and childhood and small-town America, but it is also, fundamentally, a story about us, about what we fear, what we value, and what we are willing to fight for when everything is on the line. The lore of IT. Pennywise grinning from the storm drain, the orange glow of the deadlights, the blood oath of the Losers Club, the turtle creating universes, the ritual of Chud, Derry's dark history, the 27-year cycle. All of these elements combine to create a mythology that is both uniquely King's creation and deeply resonant with archetypal human concerns. It is no wonder that IT has claimed such a prominent place in horror culture and in the imaginations of readers around the world. We return to IT again and again, in adaptations and discussions and academic analyses, because it offers no easy answers, but asks the right questions. In a world that often feels chaotic and dangerous, where institutions fail and evil persists, where childhood innocence is lost and adult responsibilities weigh heavy, IT reminds us that resistance is possible, that courage exists, that friendship matters, that imagination and belief have power, that even cosmic horrors can be made to bleed. And so the lore of IT continues to grow and evolve, passed down through generations of readers and viewers, adapted and reinterpreted, but always returning to those core truths that Stephen King embedded in his 1986 masterpiece. Pennywise may dance in the sewers, the deadlights may glow in the darkness, and ancient evil may wake in 27-year cycles. But against all of this stands the simple, profound truth that 7 friends discovered one summer in the 1950s, that together we are stronger than we are alone, and that courage, real courage, is choosing to stand and fight even when running away would be so much easier. This is the lore of IT. This is a story that has terrified and inspired millions. And this is why, decades after its publication, IT remains not just a horror novel, but a cultural touchstone, a dark mirror held up to our fears and our strengths, showing us both the monsters we might face and the heroes we might become.